Hey, in this video I'm talking about some tips that I find to be helpful when we're trying to understand what should my core position be, my pelvic position be, particularly when I'm in pain or if you're going to lift something heavy, say. So there's a lot of different language out there. A lot of physical therapists in particular will use language about pelvic tilting. I don't like that language, and I don't use it with my patients because for a few reasons. One, I find it sometimes to be confusing. Is my pelvis moving forward or back or tilting or angling? And so I always just found it confusing, first and foremost. But second, if I'm just working on moving my pelvis, I'm not actually moving the hips, the pelvis, the spine, and the rib cage as one unit. And that's what we really want to be thinking about. Everything works as a system. And so if I'm just moving my pelvis, we're not getting quite where we want. So I'm going to teach you a sequence that I find can be really helpful for finding a comfortable but stable and strong position for you and your particular anatomy. So what we're going to start with is just being as relaxed as possible. So I want you to just find a standing position where you're relaxed. You're not trying to come up, you're not trying to come down, you're not trying to hold everything. So you can kind of close your eyes, wiggle a little bit, I know that sounds silly, and just come to a resting position. Then what we're going to think about is our hips or our pelvic ring, the bones that make there, or where a belt will go. That's kind of one ring. Then I have the rib cage, that makes another cylinder or another ring. We want, in most situations, particularly if you're in pain or going to go lift something heavy, for these two rings to be stacked on top of each other, pointing in the same direction, not askew. So what I mean by askew is that if I do a pelvic tilt but don't move my ribs, now my pelvic ring is pointing that way while my ribs are still pointing straight down. Same if I go the other way. Now this is pointing, the other way, but my ribs are again there. So that can, in some people, put some painful pressure on the spine or doesn't set us up to move in a stable way. So I want to start relaxed, and the pelvis ring should roughly be just pointing straight up and down. Then we're going to find our ribs. Some people naturally, depending on their breathing pattern, have this flare to their ribs, or their rib ring, so to speak, is pointing slightly outward there. So what we're going to do with this stable posture here is you're going to take a full breath in through the nose, trying to expand the abdomen and the torso. And then you're going to exhale like you're blowing through a straw. And you're going to exhale all the way. And what we should see is you exhale all the way against some of this resistance is your rib cage drops down a bit. Then if you really get all of the air out, you might feel some engagement across the abdomen. On your next breath, you're going to hold that engagement, but breathe in again. The hope is when you hold this engagement here, as you breathe in, you're not tilting the ribs anymore. The ribs are expanding, the obliques are expanding. So I'm not tilting because I don't want to tilt as I breathe. That's one of the issues that we see with improper breathing mechanics is as I breathe in, I get this tilt there. So I want to use an exhale to get this rib ring, so to speak, angled, aligned with my pelvic ring. And then I'm going to use those. One of the roles of the core muscles is to keep that there as I then breathe in again. And this, for most people, the hope is doesn't create pressure or pain in the low back. I'm not worried about confusing kind of pelvic tilting mechanics. I'm just finding a comfortable position of the hips and then using my breathing to align the rib cage to it. Then when we go to move, we want to keep these things aligned. So if I'm just doing something like a marching exercise, which is a common core exercise we would use, where I might hold a weight, I want to keep this alignment of my pelvis and my ribs. And of course the spine, the low back, is in between. Okay? If I'm doing, let's say, a hip hinge movement like a deadlift, I want my hips to move, but I don't want pelvic tilting or rib flaring. So I'm going to find this position, send my hips backwards, but now I'm in this position, my pelvic ring is still angled to my hip ring. A pelvic tilt would look like this, or like that, arching, or a rib flare would look like a collapse, or like I'm trying to get it there. Both circumstances, hopefully you can see, the spine is in the middle and it's going to take that load. So I wouldn't initiate a deadlift like this, or like this. I want to get organized, so to speak, and then just the hips are moving. A squat, same idea. I get organized, it's more of a vertical movement, but I still see alignment of those rings. I'm not flaring my ribs. I'm not tucking my pelvis. That's often called a butt wink. So a lot of these concepts, hopefully, are fairly universal across the different movements that we see, and hopefully give you a better understanding of what's happening. So think of a ring or a circle of your pelvis, a ring or a circle of your ribs. We want to get those aligned and use that as we go into different movements. One final thought with core exercises, my preference, particularly when we're in pain, is core exercises that keep this alignment and challenge you to stay there. So something like a plank on the floor, gravity would be pushing down trying to have me do that. So I need to stay engaged to keep that. A side plank on the ground, now I have to keep that engagement from the side. Something like a band core press or Palloff press where band is pulling to the side, I'm trying to not twist because that might change that alignment. So that's where a lot of good core training principles coming from are trying to keep this alignment. So hopefully that helped. Give it a shot. Let me know how it goes. And this is something that we'll continue to explore in future videos.